over at BangTheBook.com. We are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Lots of great stuff over there. I've started writing up some of our college football bowl game previews. We'll preview every bowl game for you all the way through the national championship game. So you can check that out over at the website. Daily NHL from Parker Michaels, daily college basketball and NBA stuff. NFL, obviously, on a weekly basis. Situational betting articles in the NBA, NHL, college basketball, and I'll do one here for the bowl season as well. So tons and tons of stuff going on over at the website, where once again, we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Finally, as you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio, presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB, the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. Couple guests on the program here today, and we start with Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Brian, how's it going today, man?
So I just want to hear your reaction. So you're telling me we're not talking baseball season win totals?
Oh, God. So those came out over at PointsBet in New Jersey and Iowa here this morning. Season win totals, pennant futures, also division futures. The winter meetings are going on in San Diego right now. Steven Strasburg just got signed. Garrett Cole's probably going to be signed in the next couple of days. It's way too damn early to start talking about win totals, but, you know, we talk about this all the time here on the show, man. Every one of these leagues is a 365-day-a-year thing in the betting world now.
Well, buddy, I'm telling you that I think one of the really cool things in the way I think you've got to approach sports betting is, you know, that's ridiculous, but we're always in look-ahead mode. So, like a quick example, watching the Saints game Sunday, and like second score of the game, and Peyton goes for 2. And I told Chuck Esposito, we're over at Sunset Station, and I said, and I bet the Saints -2. I looked right at it. I said, I hope I lose. I said, I hope they lose a game. Why would you do that? Why would you? Is it arrogance? Why would you do that? So at the end of the game, of course, they're chasing that point the whole game, and they go for 2 to make it a 3-point game. Brees can't throw a pick 6. They'll lose the game. So the 2-point play was a disaster, and San Fran goes down and kicks the field goal and wins the game. So at that moment, looking ahead, it cost them that game. It probably cost him home field advantage in the playoffs. And then, oh, by the way, maybe a team that actually benefits from that stupid decision is down the road. Tennessee's got to play New Orleans, and New Orleans' fate could be determined by that point, and New Orleans could be resting guys, all because of one stupid decision. But when you're talking the sports betting, you take whatever that moment is, but what impact does it have coming up for you down the road? And one goofy little thing could impact 4 different things you're thinking about in terms of betting.
Yeah, that was a strange game in general. You know, I mean, you kind of look at those two teams, and San Francisco's doing this now. They're outscoring the opposition. Their defense has slacked off a little bit. I think the fact that they had that bye so long ago, a big reason why the defensive effort just isn't quite there anymore. I was on New Orleans in a context this week, had them minus the 2.5. Obviously, that one doesn't get to the window, but that's the thing now. You know, San Francisco is a different team than they were earlier on in the season, and that bye is very important for them to try and get one of those top 2 spots because they can give that defense a blow and the offense all of a sudden kind of firing on all cylinders. So, you know, maybe that game does wind up helping San Francisco quite a bit down the line as well. As far as the rest of the NFL Sunday, Brian, anything else that stood out to you here in Week 14?
Well, I mean, just back to that New Orleans thing for 1 second. Don't sleep on this. Now, the combination was a heck of a lot different. I think it was Tampa Bay to Cincinnati. But San Fran didn't go home after the Baltimore game. So there's really something to be said. Here, I'll bleed it into something we're going to talk about when we get to hockey. There's something about when a team is on the road and that bonding thing and the focus. And when we get to hockey, we're going to talk about all these teams now, quality teams coming home from long road trips. And that first game home is just a brutal game to play. When you're on the road, okay, yeah, I mean, boys will be boys. Maybe they go out to a bar a couple of nights, or, you know, they go out to have pizza and wings and watch games, but they're bonding together. But that when you come home, It's not just hockey or football. Now you bring family and duties and all these other things into the equation. Boy, I'll tell you, man, when these teams, especially football teams, when they go on the road and spend a week together, it works.
Yeah, it sure seems to. It definitely worked here for San Francisco. And again, that's something that we kind of look at sometimes in terms of the London games or just, these teams that play back-to-back games a long way from home. It has been, a pretty good angle for those teams that do wind up staying either out west or out east. And, for San Francisco too, I mean, San Francisco is nice most of the year, but Florida's not a bad place to be in December, So if you've got an East Coast team going west, it gets to hang out for a week, stay away from the cold and the gray and the dreariness and all that. Maybe that is something that winds up helping some of these teams during what is a very long season. I know that we only think about the NFL as 16 games over 17 weeks and this and that, but it's a grueling sport to play, obviously. These guys are all in pain every single day. The idea of not having to get cramped on a plane and travel, just kind of hang out somewhere, stretch out in that king-size bed, it makes a lot of sense, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, it really does, bud. And then, I think you look at just how the playing field shifted, and all of a sudden these races have heated up. The Rams have righted the ship. Is it too late? I will tell you this. I think there's a sneaky play. I'm going to do it too. I think Minnesota has a real opportunity to make some noise in the postseason. It's all about, San Fran's been terrific this year, and the Saints, I think, obviously, are really good. But I think this Minnesota team, with the running game they have with Cook and Madison, and all of a sudden, Thielen is about to come back. So now Diggs has gotten it done, and they were able to get by. But if you've got Diggs and Thielen, and then Rudolph is just a monster in the middle, I think Minnesota's a team can go on a run here. And the division's still in play for them, and I'm talking playing Minnesota as a wild card team. I don't think Minnesota's scared by anybody. So I would take a peek at Minnesota if you were looking for a value. I hate value. There's no value in ripping up a ticket. But I think Minnesota's an overlay, just based on where they are today, and talk to me in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. This is a team, too, that's lost 5 of its last 6 against the spread. And, so many people in this business, when you talk about spreads, lines, futures odds, stuff like that, it is kind of a what have you done for me lately type of thing. And the fact that they've underperformed expectations by not covering 5 of their last 6, probably does lend itself to some value out there. They probably are mispriced to a degree. I think Mike Zimmer's a very, very good head coach. Like you mentioned, they are starting to get healthy. They've played quite a few road games here of late as well, and maybe a little bit of a tough spot going back out west again, take on the Chargers here this week after playing Seattle a couple of weeks ago.
I got news for you. If they can't beat the Chargers, then I'm an idiot for even thinking of making the bet. But, so then it's the Chargers, and then they're sitting there hosting the Packers, and the division's still in play, and then we'll see what the Bears status is at the end. But, it's like, try to see the forest through the trees. You break their schedule down, and Thielen's been gone since, week 6? But their losses are 2 road division losses early in the season to the Packers and the Bears, and then they lose by a field goal at Kansas City and lose by a touchdown at Seattle. Is there any great disgrace in any of those? I just think this is a team conceivably that's about to get healthy and maybe go on a run that's under the radar. I could be nuts, but that's what I'm looking at.
Just to play devil's advocate real quickly, that Kansas City game was with Matt Moore and not Patrick Mahomes, but that's a game that they gave away. They had control of that game. They gave that game away, and who knows? Maybe it winds up looming large here in the playoff picture where they are still a game behind Green Bay, but obviously still have that head-to-head meeting. One other one I want to talk about here, just want to get your take on, because I actually didn't watch any of the NFL this weekend. I was out of town for the weekend. The Baltimore-Buffalo game, and we will talk about the Bills and their matchup against the Steelers here this weekend in a couple of minutes, but I know you and I were talking before the show, and you did have some thoughts on how that game played out for both of those teams.
Well, I think the Bills beat themselves, and they did a better job on Lamar Jackson than I think anybody has in the majority of the season. And they had one breakdown. They had the long touchdown pass to Hurst. That defense has them in every game. But Buffalo had their chances. Allen had a day where he wasn't overly accurate, but the Ravens were blitzing him. To me, it's on the Bills coaching staff for not making adjustments to, quick swing passes, whatever. And Allen was a crash test dummy. One of the problems with the Bills, this was a problem I mentioned a year ago at the beginning of the season about the Cowboys. I said, unless Elliott runs the ball in, this is last year, unless Elliott runs the ball in, Dallas is not going to be able to score in the red zone because they have diminutive wide receivers. Well, in the back third of the season, they got Cooper, and that all changed. Buffalo's got small wide receivers. So at the end of the game, when they had to put it in the end zone, other than a tight end, Dawson Knox, they have no big wide receivers. And in the red zone, the majority of Buffalo's touchdowns is Allen running it in. So at the end, they had their chances. I thought their clock management was bad at the end of the game. And there were openings down the field, about 4 or 5 chances. But because they're small wide receivers, Adam, Allen had a 40-yard pass, has to literally drop it in like a feather on the dime. But if it's a big wide receiver, the guy can go up and make the play. So I think that's one of the things personnel-wise that hurt Buffalo. But they're dangerous. They're still dangerous. And then, Singletary's running up and down the field, and they get the turnover they need in a short field, and they put Frank Gore in. It's like, who makes this stuff up? 3-and-out punt. It's like, I don't know. All these teams do such ridiculous things during the course of games. It drives you nuts.
Yeah, it really does. Absolutely does. And as we transition here to taking a look at Week 15, and by the way, I can't believe it's Week 15 already here in the NFL, but Thursday night, Jets and Baltimore. And you've got a Baltimore team here laying 15. There are some 14.5s out there, reduced juice on those. But a big number here on Thursday Night Football. I got to say, man, as much as I don't like the Jets and as much as that game against the Dolphins was a complete mess, tons of red zone opportunities, neither team could score a touchdown in that game, I cannot take Baltimore here. I mean, this is a massive number in a not great spot against a team that they're not going to be up to play.
Well, I mean, listen, the Jets have won 4 or 5, albeit they're not pretty. But I think there are better games on the card. But I'm with you. I'm not laying that kind of number here. Baltimore, you think of the gauntlet that they just ran. They beat the Bills on the road, not an easy place to win, and they were pushed. San Fran took them to the wire. That was a game, who's going to get the ball last? And then they murdered the Rams, who've turned into a good team. They murdered the Texans. Now, all of a sudden, Baltimore, you be careful because you want all the games you need to win. They beat the Patriots. They control their own destiny. But stay focused here because you got the Jets, Cleveland, and Pittsburgh on the back end. Now, we'll see what Pittsburgh motivation is and the need for Pittsburgh in that last game of the year. But, could you imagine Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh's playing to get in and Baltimore's playing for home field advantage? Don't take the Jets lightly. Get in there and do what you got to do.
Well, and as we take a look here, there have been 6 teams. I just ran this over on the killersports.com database. 6 teams here since the start of 2015 that have been a 10 or more point favorite on Thursday Night Football. Amazingly enough, they're 5-1 against the spread. So small sample size here to be sure, but obviously what we're kind of looking at here is that the better team generally winds up taking care of business here, 5-1 against the spread in those 6 meetings. So maybe Baltimore is kind of the side here just because of the fact they are clearly the better team. And if you've got a favorite of this magnitude on a short week, you obviously have a big disparity between the two teams. But the problem for Baltimore here is it's not this game in a vacuum. It's the games that they've played leading up to this game. They put a lot into that game, against Houston with the blowout win. A lot 8 days later going on the road to Los Angeles, blew them out. Then a couple physical games against San Francisco and Buffalo. You got the Cleveland game on deck, a revenge spot for them. Then Pittsburgh after that, where the number 1 seed probably hanging in the balance those last 2 weeks. That's the worry for me. I know Baltimore's far and away, head, shoulders, knees, and toes, the better team. But the spot, because of who they've recently played, makes this just so tough to take them.
No, there's no doubt. And there are probably 6 or 7 games on the card where we have things of this ilk, not the short work week, but motivation becomes a big thing and how the playing field has changed for so many. Real quick, the Buffalo-Pittsburgh game. Here's the Bills, had an opportunity, showed a lot of fight, didn't kick the door down, had the chance to tie the game, get it to overtime when they were pushed around most of the game, come up short. But Buffalo, had they won that game, and then it was all about putting pressure on New England, sure enough, KC beat New England, Buffalo would have controlled their own destiny to be the 1 seed. Now, the difference, all of a sudden, you're playing Pittsburgh this week. If they lose to Pittsburgh, Pittsburgh jumps over Buffalo as the 5 seed. So the amazing, impact that one game has from week to week. That in your wildest dreams, Adam, if I'd have told you in July that in week 15 the game of the week was going to be Houston and Tennessee, what would you have said to me?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't have believed you at all. I mean, it's been crazy, and we can go ahead and talk about that Buffalo-Pittsburgh game because, again, obviously a lot going on here with this one. You mentioned this about the Bills. When they get that big spotlight game, that chance to show something, it's a different kind of feel. It's a different kind of atmosphere. Pittsburgh almost always in these primetime spots over the course of the year. Maybe not with Duck Hodges at quarterback, but, a team that's accustomed to that big spotlight. Their pass rush is dangerous and deadly. It's been great for them on defense. Josh Allen certainly mobile enough to evade the rush if he gets that opportunity. Pittsburgh, though, only a 1.5 to a 2.5 point favorite out there in the market, depending on where you look. Are you surprised at the implication or the insinuation, I guess I should say, that Buffalo would be favored on a neutral here?
Well, it's up to 2.5 Pittsburgh. That thing's steaming towards 3. I think Pittsburgh's a public team. Let's start with that. I don't think it's an unfair statement. I do believe Buffalo's the better football team, and Pittsburgh's had injuries all year long. I think Mike Tomlin has to be in the discussion for Coach of the Year, what he's done with this group. And I give them full marks. We talked last week in the podcast, so look out, man. Pittsburgh, that was a trap game for them in Arizona, although it was one of the biggest home games for a road team I've ever seen. That was insane that Steelers fans took over that place in Arizona. But and sometimes I think a loss can be a good thing. Like, the Thanksgiving thing was kind of a free roll for the Bills, out of conference game. But I think Buffalo, even though they lost to Baltimore, they're kicking themselves going, oh, everybody's talking about quote unquote, Baltimore is at the moment playing the best football in the NFL, and the Bills blew the game, beat themselves in many respects. I think you can turn that into a positive, but the one thing that's really different, there's pressure now on the Bills. They're like, wait a minute, we were on cruise control, and the division's still in play. If Buffalo wins this game, the AFC East is still in play. Because let me tell you something, bud. The odds that New England's going to lose to Cincinnati or Miami is minuscule. But this New England thing, Brady, Belichick, as great as they are, and maybe they dial something up for the playoffs, and it's all about that defense has been really good. But, Adam, the last month, the only way New England can get the ball into the end zone is with a trick play. Yeah, that offense for New England is broke.
It's a real bad look. I mean, they can't run the football at all. Teams are kind of daring Brady to beat them, and he hasn't been able to do it. They miss Gronk a ton. I mean, we've all seen the splits with and without Gronk. They miss him. They miss that guy in the middle of the field that takes a safety away. They miss that guy that can stretch the field, open things up for some of those crossing routes to the possession guys. They don't have that anymore, and it shows.
It's funny
it's a problem.
It's funny you brought that up, and I hadn't even thought of this. And, who cares? But I don't know if it's vindication, but I fought the fight out here, and I know I've mentioned this when you and I have been doing stuff together now, 4 or 5 years? But I mean, literally for his entire career, I would talk to the odds makers and no, quarterbacks, skill position guys in their heyday, Moss and Terrell Owens maybe were worth 1.5 to the spread if they weren't going to be in. And I swear to you, I said the player other than a quarterback, I've been saying this for a decade, that should have had the most impact on the wagering line, and it was never factored in. I thought Rob Gronkowski was worth a field goal. I mean, seriously, I thought he was worth 3 points to the wagering line because in the red zone, they were unstoppable. And because if Gronkowski was there and 3 guys are focused on him and he'd still score, but everybody else is running around with single coverage. This guy's absence is now proven the point. They cannot get it in the end zone.
No, they can't. And I mean, this is a team, you got to think about it like, and obviously we've gotten way away from the Buffalo-Pittsburgh game here, but just real quickly, with New England, I mean, you look at the schedule that they've played. You look at the quarterbacks they've played. And one of my winners last week was the Chiefs, looking at it saying, they're not going to have the same kind of takeaway success against a guy like Patrick Mahomes. They haven't done it the last few weeks, facing, guys like Dak Prescott, facing guys like Lamar Jackson. They're not getting that same takeaway success. And if you make them drive the field, they are not going to do it. They went into that game last week, number 1 in the NFL in average starting field position and 15th in points per drive.
Give them credit.
Drive the field.
Give them credit, right? I mean, because whatever it takes, they find a way. But if you further dissect a gravy schedule they played, they won at Buffalo 16-10. They won the game because they blocked a punt for a touchdown. They beat the Cowboys 13-9. They won that game because they blocked a punt and got the ball at about the 10-yard line. And then they blocked a punt, I believe, in the Chiefs game as well. So, I mean, and that's the only way because they got short fields for instant mashed potatoes in those 3 games because of a blocked punt. Defense and special teams, I think them in Green Bay, you look at them, wow, those records, they got to be great teams. I'm not doing cartwheels about either one of those teams, regardless of their record.
All right, speaking of teams that the Patriots have recently played, the Houston Texans, they beat them with Deshaun Watson. And, again, facing a legitimate quarterback has been a problem for New England here so far this season. Houston last week, I'm so upset with myself because that was your quintessential letdown spot. Playing a Denver team, it's still playing hard with a good defense, a first-year quarterback in Drew Lock trying to make a name for himself, trying to get some playing time for next year. Houston comes out completely flat in the first half. They are nowhere near covering that number of 9. They didn't even win the game outright. What do they do here to bounce back this week in a massive game in the AFC South against the Tennessee Titans, where the Titans are a field goal home favorite?
Well, doing stuff yesterday morning, there were 2 numbers, and it's not often in the NFL you say there were bad numbers. And there were 2, I thought, yesterday. And sure enough, the steam rolls on. This was the total in the Houston-Tennessee games, open 47.5. It's up to 50 in a lot of places. And Houston, they can go up and down the field. They've got the weapons, although we'll see what Fuller's status is, and he is important to them. But Tennessee, it's ridiculous offensively. Identifying it early and getting on the front end of this, that's how you make money doing this stuff. And it was readily apparent about 5 weeks ago. This Tennessee thing's a different animal because the play calling is insane to me. If they just gave the ball to Derrick Henry, the amount of times that I'm sure he'd want the ball, but sometimes the play you're like, what are you doing? Henry would be up by 500 yards in terms of leading the league in rushing. This guy's a beast. So now teams are putting, the 8 in the box to stop Henry, and Tannehill's going over the top and making plays with his feet. Then when they play a base defense, Henry's getting 7 yards a rush. I mean, this Tennessee offense it's scary what they're doing right now. Weather, we'll see what the deal's going to be this weekend. But to me, this Tennessee's a dead under team with Mariota, and the minute Tannehill came in, this team's playing breakneck football.
And I think that there's something to all of this from a psychological standpoint to it. And maybe we don't, focus on this enough, especially with all the metrics that are out there. And, the metrics obviously support that Tannehill and the Titans offense playing very, very well since they made that change. Looks like the weather, by the way, on Sunday, 20% chance of rain, not too bad. We'll see if wind winds up being a factor in Nashville. But, psychologically speaking, and we kind of see this a little bit with Pittsburgh, going from Mason Rudolph to Duck Hodges, with Tennessee, you have to try. You have to do everything you can to see if Marcus Mariota is your guy because you spent that second overall pick on him. You have to give him every chance in the world to be that dude. They gave him a lot of chances, and they found out that he wasn't that guy. And the Titans, players are smart. These guys aren't stupid. they know, hey, we're trying to force feed this because we want to try and justify that pick. They go to Tannehill, switch flips. Everything completely different for this team. There's something psychological to that allows these teams to go on these runs and go on these streaks and have more belief. Think about it last week, or 2 weeks ago, I should say. Colts game, tied, on the road, 17-17 midway through the fourth quarter. If you've got Mariota, you're a Titans player wondering, how do we find a way to score? How do we find a way to win this game? With Tannehill, 14 points, you win 31-17, go on to the next week, travel cross country, and still blow out Oakland. So Tennessee is a team kind of on a different level right now from a psychological, from a confidence standpoint. And as somebody who is a largely stats and metrics-based handicapper across all the sports, it's a gray area for me because you can't quantify it, but you know it has an impact, and we're seeing it play out here with Tennessee.
No, I mean, honestly, again, the intangibles are such big things, and metrics and analytics and power ratings. These are, obviously massive parts of what you're doing. But sometimes you just got to say, wait a minute, it's right in front of your face, man. It's keep it simple, stupid. That's a bad spot. And I probably over the course of time, you're going to be right a lot more than you're going to be wrong. Just saying, no, that's just a bad spot. I don't care what the number says. And I would say to you, I thought the total on that game was ridiculously low. And yesterday morning, again, if you're going to do well doing this stuff, it's sometimes it's as much when you bet as well as who you're betting, but when you bet them. And yesterday morning, I'm sitting there doing stuff, and I'm like, Oakland, are you kidding me? Oakland yesterday morning was 6, and I was doing a different thing, and I said, listen, they're not a doubt in my mind. This game's getting to 7, but I'm almost convinced the closer we get to the weekend, I think this game goes through 7, and you don't see that a lot. I think this game gets up to 7.5, 8, with Oakland hosting Jacksonville. I mean, Marone could be fired before they get there. He's a dead man walking. They're a disorganized, undisciplined lot that's run for the bus. Yeah. Can the Raiders do something stupid, turn the ball over in their own end, and all of a sudden it becomes a football game? You bet. But how do you not take into account it's the last game ever in Oakland, and literally both teams are going to want to get the hell out of there. As soon as that, they're going to be sprinting to the locker room as they start tearing the stadium apart. I mean, Gruden they're not going to quit on Gruden. They've already quit on this guy. How was this number not higher to begin with? You still got time. There's still 6.5s out there because I think it closes 7.5, 8.
Well, speaking of coaches, we transition over to the NHL side of things here for a few minutes. And so breaking news right before the show that Dallas fired head coach Jim Montgomery, and information starting to come out a little bit on Twitter saying that, Dallas, according to one source, really had no choice in the matter. There was really nothing that they could do. They had to make this change based on whatever it is that Montgomery did. But Dallas is in action tonight, taking on the New Jersey Devils, who are absolutely awful in their own right, just fired their head coach for performance reasons, not for anything else, not that long ago. What do you do here with the NHL right now where you've got a lot of things going on here with these coaches, where a lot of things coming to light with assistants, head coaches as well? You sort of wonder about some of these teams because the NHL, having been a hockey player, knowing sort of the camaraderie that goes on in that locker room, it is one of those sports where it is very chemistry based. You do kind of get into a lot of rhythms, a lot of routines, stuff like that. A lot of things upsetting the apple carts for these teams right now.
Well, when the Peters thing happened and then it bled out and then the Mark Crawford thing come out, and you're sitting there going, there's a Pandora's box that has been opened, and it was just a question of how many more there are going to be. And here comes, winning you would think, solves a lot of problems. But this is a Dallas team that's sitting there playing terrific hockey. They're in first place. They're the top wild card. They're 17-11-3. There's just so many more that are going to come. It's obvious that and buddy, it's a bizarre topic. Immediately, the minute anybody is accused now, they're guilty. Now, Peters did what he did. The Crawford thing, again, it's an era. It's eons ago, and there are two camps. And I'm talking about listening to old hockey players. Well, that's just the way it was. But you're paying for the sins of the past, in an era where we are now. Now, again, if it's over the top and egregious, sure, you should pay for that. But I just think that there are coaches that aren't sleeping at night all around the NHL because former players, guys that got cut, thought a coach gave them the short end of the stick. These things are just going to keep coming and coming and coming and coming. And now the league's putting in a hotline for players to call in, and I'll tell you, watch this thing for the next couple of years.
Well, and a Dallas team here that was 16-4-2 in their last 22 games. So they got off to a slow start, much like they did last year. Kind of some people coming out, sort of questioning the mettle of the team. And once again, that winds up working. They go on a nice run. Again, speaks to the streaky nature of the NHL and really the NBA too. But, teams start playing well and they continue playing well for a sustained period of time until something else comes up. And, we'll see what this winds up being for Jim Montgomery, who, of course, was hired from University of Denver prior to last season. So,
good. Wait till God only knows. And we don't know what it is that's been going on. It'd be speculative. But I wonder if what he did was something all the way back to college.
I don't know. Who knows? I guess everything will kind of come to light here.
And believe me, that's a different animal, right? A college coach holding scholarships over guys' heads, and oh, by the way, the guys you're trying to motivate, maybe in bizarre ways to do it. But you're looking at college kids that aren't making, more than you are, looking at you going, I got news for you. They get rid of you before they get rid of me. That's the era we're living in now.
Well, we'll see what happens here with this situation. But as far as the NHL card for tonight goes, Brian, I believe there's 12 or 13 games on the board here. So a very, very busy card for this Tuesday night. As we mentioned, we just talked about New Jersey and Dallas, a line that I would presume maybe goes down a little bit here, although New Jersey, a very tough team to bet right now. Anything that you are taking a look at here in the NHL this evening?
Yeah, there were a couple of games. Tampa got smoked by the Islanders last night. Something ain't right with Tampa. They still got a lot of games in hand on everybody, and over the long haul, you say they should be okay, but I'm telling you, every year, like Vegas, Calgary just jumped by them and went into third in the Pacific, and everybody out here is like, yeah, they should be okay. And, well, Edmonton and Arizona got better, and other teams have gotten better. So it's hard to flip a switch in this league. Back-to-back nights, I think I like the over 6.5 in the game. I think you'll see a lot of goals there. And then, when Toronto goes on the road anywhere, they've got raucous fan support. But specifically when Toronto goes on the road in Canadian cities, believe me, Vancouver's celebrating their 50th year. The same thing goes on in Buffalo, where a third of the Sabres season ticket holders are from Southern Ontario. And they're Sabres fans, except when the Leafs come to town, because they grew up with the Leafs. And the atmosphere will be nuts in Vancouver tonight when Toronto plays there. And I think that's a game goes up and down the ice, too. I like the over in that game.
Real quickly, I don't think we have any of these games here tonight. Make sure you keep an eye on my situational betting article over at BangTheBook.com. But I do want to give you a chance to expand quickly here on something you mentioned earlier on in the show where, these teams in that first game back off a road trip are just, it's printing money to fade them.
Well, and I will tell you that you've got to be adaptable and try to learn. And I'm telling you, I got a new one, Adam, and that's, I think when teams are going off on the road, and I would put the minimum caveat on it of 4. If they're going on the road for that gauntlet trip, every team has 2 or 3 of them a year. The first game on a long road trip, teams are so invested in getting the trip off to a good start that their play on the first game of a long road trip. And then the home run of all home runs are teams coming home from let's say a minimum 4-game road trip, you fade the home team. This has gone on. I mean, we had the one where 3 weeks ago where Florida rallied from 4 down and beat Boston in the third period, had a great road trip, and they came home, and I think it was the day we did the podcast. I said the best bet on the card is Winnipeg plus $1.50, and Winnipeg beat them the first game home. Vegas has played 3 Eastern road trips and come home and got killed in all 3 games. Colorado beat them 6-1. Chicago beat them 5-3. They had a, semi-successful at 5 points out of 6 on an Eastern road trip in New York City. Come home, the Rangers with revenge. Oh, by the way, the Rangers starting a road trip beat Vegas 5-0. Washington went on a 4-game Western road swing and went unbeaten. They come home, and Columbus takes them to the woodshed. I love hockey. I'll say, man, these situational things are just, it's an 82-game grind. And the goalie's the great equalizer, but there are just situations. It doesn't matter who the teams are. Insert Team X and Team Y. Just look at the situation and just bet the situation because it holds true like 75, 80% of the time.
Situational betting, very important across all sports. And we'll finish up this segment here talking about golf because there's kind of a situational angle that you're looking at here for the President's Cup. First, explain what's going on here with the President's Cup, what the format is like, and then talk about what it is that you're looking to do from a betting standpoint.
Well, it's akin to the Ryder Cup. It's a match play, and it brings different guys into the equation, guys that are really good golfers that don't win golf tournaments because they have 1 or 2 or 3 brutal holes, take a double or a triple bogey and shoot themselves out of winning the golf tournament, but they're great golfers. In match play, you have the bad hole, big deal. Walk to the next tee. I lost a hole. And you find guys that can flag hunt and are guys that are birdie machines and great putters because match play, some guy could hit it. Like Matsuyama would be a prime example. He's on the international team. Matsuyama's probably going to have whoever he's playing, Matsuyama probably be, putting from the 8 to 15-foot range the majority of the time, and the guy he's playing against is going to be putting from the 15 to 25-foot range, and the other guy's a great putter. He's going to pour him in, and Matsuyama can't knock him down. So those are things you look at, but I do believe there's a real opportunity, I would think. This thing gets underway Wednesday night, so it's Thursday in Australia. The American team, the majority of these guys just played in that Hero Challenge thing. In fact, we were talking about the tournament last week and we mentioned Henrik Stenson. Henrik Stenson could be a great play because he's not getting on the plane and looking ahead to the President's Cup. He was there to win $1 million, and he did. All those guys, the majority of the guys on the American team, hopped on a plane, and oh, by the way, the plane was delayed. They had problems, and then they flew 26 hours to get over to Australia. And they were getting massages and treatment on the plane. And Tiger Woods said, well, we got to spend 26 hours together in a tin can. Well, maybe that's good for bonding. I don't know. But the international team's been over there practicing, and these guys just had a 26-hour flight a day and a half ago. I'd be absolutely, the matchups come out tomorrow at 4 p.m. In day one, I would be, and it depends what the matchups are, but don't sleep on underdog prices. I think the international team gets off to a great start while the Americans are still jet-lagged to the moon.
What I'm seeing here, plus 270 on the international side, minus 360 on the U.S. That's at 5 dimes. But make sure you look wherever in your jurisdiction to find odds here for the President's Cup. Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. How can people check out those 2 shows there, Brian?
Noon to 2 Pacific time, kshp.com. I'll put out the show links on my Twitter account at Brian Blessing. We'll be doing videos for you as well at Bang the Book. And it's amazing. We've made week 15 of the NFL, and I'm assuming next week we'll start diving into it when you're already looking at baseball season win totals. But again, I think you got to take the intangible stuff into account. We'll get into it next week, bowl season. What conferences are good, who wants to be there, what star players aren't going to play. I mean, bowl season's a different animal too. Now, Adam, there's so much between the line stuff that you have to take into account in sports betting in all facets of this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. There definitely is. And make sure you check out those two shows with Brian. Again, kshp.com, at Brian Blessing on Twitter. And he's got some free pick videos coming our way for us over on our Bang the Book YouTube page. So make sure you keep an eye out for those. Brian, always a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you again next week.
Always enjoy it, Adam. Have a good week, bud.